Welcome to the deep dive. A lot of you listening use your love for football as, well, a really great way to dive into the English language.
Absolutely. It's a perfect combination.
So today, that's exactly what we're doing. We're looking closely at a really significant recent match, using it as our learning material, if you like.
That's the plan. And we've gathered quite a bit of info match reports from the official Arsenal site, The Guardian, Sky Sports, CNN, plus some other bits and pieces. And what's interesting is how they all offer slightly different views, different details.
Yeah, and different language, too, which is great for, picking up those football phrases.
Exactly. A really rich source of English football terms.
And the game we're focusing on is that first leg of the Champions League semifinal. Arsenal versus Paris Saint-Germain, played Tuesday, April 29th, 2025, over at the Emirates Stadium.
A massive game.
Huge. So our aim here, it isn't just to give a match summary. It's more about digging out the key information, the main talking points, and crucially, highlighting the specific English vocabulary and phrases you hear all the time in football discussions. Okay, so where do we start? The result.
Yeah, let's kick off with the bottom line. PSG won it 1-0. The decisive moment came really early on, Ousmane Dembélé scoring in just the 4th minute.
Wow, 4th minute.
Oh,
that changes the whole dynamic straight away.
It really does. And what's quite significant, historically speaking, is that this was actually PSG's first ever win against Arsenal. You'll see words like historic or maybe maiden victory used for things like that.
First time, right.
Yeah.
That's a big one for PSG fans. But even with that 1-0 loss at home, the reports, like the one on Arsenal.com, they stress that the semifinal still hangs in the balance. What exactly does that phrase mean in this context?
Well, hangs in the balance is super common for these two-legged ties. It basically means nothing's decided yet. It's still very open, and it'll all come down to that second game over in Paris.
So Arsenal still have a real shot, despite the setback.
Oh, absolutely. It's far from over. And that Arsenal report also mentioned, the atmosphere before the game. It was Arsenal's first men's Champions League semi at the Emirates in, 16 years?
16 years, yeah. It must have been buzzing.
Totally. They described a frenzy, talked about rousing renditions of chants, fireworks galore, really setting the scene, before that early goal maybe put a bit of a dampener on things.
Paints a picture, definitely.
Yeah.
And that 1-goal lead for PSG, Arsenal.com called it a slender lead. Why slender?
Yeah.
What did that word tell us?
Slender, yeah. It just emphasizes how small the advantage is. 1 goal in football, especially with 90 minutes still to go at the opponent's ground. It's not secure. It's precarious.
Easily overturned, potentially.
Exactly. You might also hear it called a narrow lead or a slight advantage. Same idea. It's tight. So let's talk about how PSG actually got that slender lead, Dembélé's goal.
Yeah. Break that down for us. How did it happen, according to the reports?
Well, the sources all point to PSG having a good spell of possession just before it. Dembélé got the ball, moved forward, found Kvaratskhelia making a run into the box.
Oh.
Kvaratskhelia then cut it back, sort of across the penalty area, and Dembélé was right there to hit it first time. Found the bottom corner.
Nice finish.
Very. And Arsenal.com made a point of noting it was his 11th goal in the Champions League this season. Just underlines his threat. You'd call that a clinical finish, taking the chance decisively.
Clinical finish. Good term. Sounds like a well-constructed goal. But then Arsenal thought they'd equalize, didn't they? Early second half. That sounds like a huge moment.
Oh, massive. And this is where the drama and the language used to describe it really ramps up. Declan Rice took a free kick, whipped it into a dangerous spot.
A devilish free kick, I think one report called it.
Yeah, something like that. Mikel Merino got up, headed it in. Imagine the noise at the Emirates then. Just eruption.
Yeah, relief and excitement.
But it was short-lived. VAR stepped in. The video assistant referee.
Ah, VAR.
Yeah.
Never far away.
Indeed. And after what Arsenal.com said was a lengthy check, The Guardian mentioned it took about 3 minutes, the goal was ruled out. A tight offside decision.
Tight and lengthy always suggests controversy, doesn't it? The Guardian kind of explained it, saying the issue might have been an Arsenal player maybe blocking a defender from an offside spot, so not straightforward.
Not at all. And CNN really captured that feeling, talking about the agonizing wait for the decision and how ruling it out sucked that newfound enthusiasm out of this place.
Agonizing sucked. Those words really convey the feeling, don't they? More than just reporting the fact.
Exactly. That's the emotional language of football reporting. But, it wasn't just about that one disallowed goal. There were other chances, other key moments for both sides.
Right. It wasn't the only story. What else stood out in terms of goalmouth action?
Well, Arsenal had a decent chance near the end of the first half. Martinelli, he managed to beat the offside trap, timed his run perfectly.
That's a classic football phrase, beat the offside trap.
It is. But his shot, trying to slip it past Donnarumma, was saved. Then later on, Leandro Trossard had a go, and Donnarumma had to tip it around the post. Another good save.
So Arsenal were creating things, but just couldn't get past the keeper. Denied by Donnarumma, perhaps?
Denied is a good word, yeah. But PSG, they weren't just defending. They had chances to finish the game off, really, late on.
Yeah, the reports mentioned some misses.
That's right. Their substitutes, Bradley Barcola and Goncalo Ramos, both had pretty clear chances. Barcola slid a shot wide.
Meaning he just missed the goal.
Yeah, missed the target when he probably should have done better. And Ramos was unlucky, hit the crossbar of the woodwork. Arsenal.com called these huge let-offs for Arsenal.
A let-off. That's a great one. Means you got away with it, basically.
Precisely. Lucky escape. So, a game of fine margins, as the cliche goes. And a huge part of why the margins stayed so fine was Gianluigi Donnarumma in goal for PSG.
Yeah, seems like he had a blinder.
He really did. All the reports use words like superb, brilliant. The Guardian highlighted 2 specific brilliant saves. CNN even called one stop magical.
Wow, high praise.
Absolutely. It just shows how important he was. You could definitely say he was instrumental in PSG getting that win and, crucially, the clean sheet.
Instrumental. Good vocabulary there. Okay, let's pivot slightly to the tactics. How did the team set up? How did the game flow strategically?
Well, early doors, it was all PSG. Arsenal.com noted they had something like 76% possession after 20 minutes, just keeping the ball, playing sharp, accurate passes.
But Arsenal really struggled to, what's the phrase, get a foothold.
Exactly that, get a foothold, meaning they couldn't establish themselves, couldn't get control of the midfield, or put pressure on PSG initially.
But that changed. They didn't just roll over.
No. Towards the end of the first half, and certainly at the start of the second, Arsenal grew into it. They started creating those chances we talked about. But one factor that seemed quite significant was Thomas Partey being out suspended for Arsenal.
Ah, yes. Partey's absence. How did that affect things?
Sky Sports pointed out that the area Dembélé drove into for the goal is exactly where Partey so frequently occupies. His absence left a bit of a hole there, perhaps, and it meant Declan Rice maybe had to adjust his role, sit a bit deeper.
Right, knock-on effect. A tactical trade-off, maybe.
Yeah, good way to put it. You gain something defensively, perhaps, but maybe lose some of Rice's forward drive. And speaking of tactics, The Guardian mentioned PSG's goal came after a sequence of 26 passes.
26 passes. That's very deliberate build-up play.
It really is. Arsenal.com actually highlighted that's the most passes leading to a PSG goal on record in the Champions League, and the most for a goal Arsenal have conceded since way back in 2003-04.
Wow. That stat really emphasizes PSG's patient approach for the goal. They really worked the ball, as they say.
He did. And Thierry Henry, the Arsenal legend, he had some thoughts on the defending for that goal, too.
Oh, yeah. What did Henry say? Always interesting to hear his take.
Well, according to The Athletic, he was a bit critical. He focused on Bukayo Saka's pressing, how he tried to win the ball back. Henry felt Saka kind of let PSG play inside too easily, which opened up the space.
Interesting. Shows how tiny details matter at this level. What about Dembélé himself? Sky Sports mentioned him playing as a false 9. Can you explain that for listeners maybe not familiar with the term?
Sure. A false 9 isn't your traditional striker who stays high up the pitch. They drop deep into midfield areas to get the ball. The Athletic said Dembélé had total freedom of the pitch.
So hard to mark.
Very. Defenders don't know whether to follow him deep or stay put. It can cause confusion, disorient the defense, and create space for others. A clever tactic.
Sounds like it worked well for PSG here.
Yeah.
Now, Arsenal are usually strong from set pieces, corners, free kicks.
Yeah, they've scored a lot from them this season.
But apart from that disallowed goal, it sounds like they didn't really trouble PSG much from those situations in this match.
That seems to be the case. Sky Sports actually pointed out that PSG have looked a bit vulnerable to set pieces in their French league games, so it was maybe a missed opportunity for Arsenal.
Right.
The Athletic mentioned that tactic Arsenal use, where players start offside on free kicks, hoping to time their run back. Well, that's what cost them with the VAR call on Merino's goal.
Ah, the fine line between clever and illegal.
Exactly. And the Athletic also made an interesting point about the team styles. They suggested PSG had more of a team-based approach, whereas Arsenal maybe relied more on moments of individual brilliance.
What does that imply practically?
It suggests PSG's win was maybe built more on collective structure, tactical discipline, working as a unit, whereas Arsenal, while obviously a great team, perhaps needed one of their stars to produce a moment of magic that didn't quite come off this time. Just an observation, but an interesting one.
Okay, let's hear some reactions then. The managers must have had plenty to say. Mikel Arteta first.
Yeah, The Guardian quoted him, understandably disappointed with the result, losing at home. He talked about the margins at this level, how small things decide these big games.
Common refrain in tight matches.
Very. But he was also looking forward. He said, it's only halftime and we have a big chance and they need to do something special in Paris. So disappointment mixed with resolve.
Gotta stay positive, I suppose. What about Luis Enrique for PSG?
He called it a great night, felt they controlled the game for long spells. But importantly, he also said it's not over. He knows Arsenal are dangerous, especially in the second leg. Cautious optimism, maybe.
Makes sense. And the players. Arsenal's keeper, David Raya.
Raya, again in The Guardian, he actually felt Arsenal dominated most of the game after conceding early. He gave credit to Donnarumma for those brilliant saves.
Right.
But he was bullish about the next game, said, we can win against any team, and they'll go to Paris next week to win the game. Strong words.
That's the spirit they'll need. And Mikel Merino, the guy who had the goal disallowed.
Yeah, Arsenal.com had a quote from him. Very short, very direct. We can't wait to go to Paris. Simple, but shows their determination to put it right.
Mm-hmm. Now, Clarence Seedorf, Champions League royalty, he weighed in too.
He did, yeah. Speaking on Amazon Prime, apparently. His analysis, reported by The Guardian, was quite pointed towards Arsenal. He suggested a fear of winning kicked in.
Ooh, strong words.
Yeah. He felt PSG showed more nous, more Champions League experience, knowing when to press, when to sit back, when to counter. He felt Arsenal maybe weren't quite as streetwise tactically on the night.
Interesting perspective from someone who's won it multiple times.
Definitely adds weight. And just quickly, PSG's midfielder Vitinha, he backed up his manager, calling it a very, very good performance and saying they controlled the game with the ball. Reinforces that possession point.
Okay, so lots of different takes. What about the history books? Any records or milestones from this game?
Quite a few, actually. Arsenal.com mentioned that the average age of both starting teams was under 26. Pretty young for a semifinal.
Yeah, that is young.
And it was a big milestone game for Arsenal. They're 200th in the Champions League, only the 7th club ever to reach that number, and just the 2nd from England after Man United.
200 games. Quite the European pedigree. Any less welcome stats for Arsenal?
Afraid so. That early Dembele goal. According to Arsenal.com, it was the earliest they've conceded in the Champions League since 2016. And failing to score at home. First time in the CL since 2016 as well.
Ouch. Not records you want to be setting.
No. And on the PSG side, that 26-pass goal was, as we said, their longest sequence on record. Plus, Sky Sports noted PSG have now beaten 4 different Premier League teams in this season's Champions League alone. Shows they can handle English opposition.
4 teams. Wow. And it's worth remembering, isn't it? Neither of these clubs has actually won the big trophy.
That's right. CNN reminded us both have been runners-up once. Arsenal way back in '06, PSG more recently in 2020, adds that extra edge, that desperation perhaps, to finally win it.
Absolutely. And Arsenal's unbeaten run against PSG is now over 2.
Yep, that record's gone. But CNN did offer a glimmer of hope for Arsenal fans. They mentioned how Arsenal women recently overturned a first-leg loss against Lyon to make their final. Maybe some inspiration there.
Within the club, yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit of positive precedent.
And The Athletic even threw in that Spurs are one of the very few teams to reach a final after losing the first leg at home. So it can be done. It's just rare.
Okay, so looking ahead then, the second leg is when and where?
It's Wednesday, May 7th, over at the Parc des Princes in Paris. But before that, both teams have league games this weekend. Arsenal play Bournemouth, PSG play Strasbourg. They'll want to navigate those safely. You might call them warm-up fixtures, although managers hate that term.
Yeah, I bet they do.
Yeah.
And just circling back to the English language aspect, we've naturally used a ton of football-specific terms today. Maybe recap a few key ones for listeners.
Sure. We've talked about trying to get a foothold, teams asserting themselves, a player being instrumental. We mentioned a clinical finish, a disallowed goal, brilliant saves, beating the offside trap, tipping it round the post, a shot slid wide, and a let-off. Tactically, we covered pressing, the false nine, set pieces, patient build-up play. And for the overall tie, phrases like slender lead and hangs in the balance are really common.
Loads there. So it really shows how following football news is just a fantastic way to pick up real everyday English, especially the vocabulary used in analysis and discussion.
Couldn't agree more. It's practical, it's engaging.
So wrapping this deep dive up, PSG take a narrow, slender 1-0 lead to Paris. But as we've heard, this tie definitely hangs in the balance. Arsenal have a mountain to climb, maybe, but it's not impossible.
Not at all. It's set up for a really tense second leg. And hopefully breaking down this first game, the reports, the language has been useful for, boosting your English understanding through football.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So here's something for you to think about. Considering everything we've discussed, PSG's early control, Arsenal's fight back, the disallowed goal, the tactics, Donnarumma saves. What specific changes does Mikel Arteta need to make for Arsenal in Paris? What has to be different for them to turn this around? Your passion for the game can make learning English, well, not just easier, but actually fun.
Which is key, isn't it? Enjoyment.
Exactly. And it's fascinating how, our brains work. When you're genuinely into something, like, say, the latest transfer gossip or a really nail-biting match,
Yeah.
your brain is just much more open to taking in new information.
Yeah.
It's not like forcing yourself through, boring grammar exercises.
No forced marks.
It's more like absorbing the language sort of naturally within a context you already get and, importantly, you care about. You're just more likely to notice new words, different ways of phrasing things.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like study, does it?
Not at all. It's just keeping up with a sport you love.
Exactly.
Look, if you're finding this deep dive helpful and you want to keep exploring this whole connection between football and learning English, there's something really simple but really important you can do for us.
That's right. Please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel.
And it keeps us motivated, honestly, to keep bringing you more content that mixes your love for football with ways to actually improve your English.
Exactly. By subscribing, you'll get those daily updates. Football news, real English, fun content, all designed to help you get better.
So yeah, make sure you don't miss out. See you in the next one.